Hello everyone and welcome along to the second edition of the Shakedown after another compelling round of the RR League's GT3 Masters VII in association with TREQ. And you'll notice, aside from Bram keeping his tradition of being first out, the rain is again falling as the drivers head out into the qualifying session of the 2.4 hour endurance race at the quintessential circuit of Spa-Francorchamps. And it's a real Ardennes forest rain this time. Not that drizzle we saw in Mogurod 2 weeks ago, so the drivers have the challenge of a proper wet track to overcome for getting on for, well, the next 3 hours. As expected, we had a strong showing of home nation drivers present. 9 of the starting 30 are from the land of chocolate, waffles and beer, and all hoping to give a good account of themselves out there today. And maybe, just maybe, we ought to consider including sim racing drivers on that list of great Belgian products after today's masterclass from Bram de Preter. And commentators on that list too, of course. Impossible to ignore those magical tones of Miguel in the commentary box. But even after taking pole position, the race win and fastest lap, I bet the biggest smile, or most satisfied driver on the grid, won't be found in Team WRT garage. No sir. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure Bram will be elated to win his first home race so emphatically, but I just suspect, taking into account we only have 2 races left of the season. Can you believe that? Just 2 to go in the Masters? The most content driver will be Max Mr. P2 Bayer, who yet again, for the 4th time this series, stood on the second step of the podium alongside Bram, who took the win. But we all know the Masters champ isn't the product of 1 race, or even 4, as impressive as that is. Rather, one's cumulative effort over a long, arduous season, and up to press, Max's consistency is paying dividends. And the championship table confirms he's in a strong position to land his first Masters here at RRL. But you can bet your bed'em dollar that neither garage will be entertaining such thoughts. There's still 3.5 hours of racing left at the tight Brands Hatch and the Nürburgring, and what pressure or inspiration might the German feel there? And drivers are all too aware how quickly momentum can shift in a heartbeat. It wouldn't surprise me, if Team WRT were doing everything possible to fix De Keyser's internet issues, so to give Bram some backup going into the final 2 races. Now we all know Eau Rouge, probably the most famous corner on the circuit, or the most famous corner name, as the bend itself is pretty much an insignificant flick left. But when you combine it with the right left of Radion, meaning steep rise, that we can see disappearing off over the horizon, then you can begin to understand what all the fuss is about, as drivers take this almost flat out, or at least in the dry. This little spot here has been the scene of many dramatic photographs over the course of history that captures the awe of the moment. And for more images of awe, be sure to check out Radek's Spa picture album, up now in the Discord channel. Quite astonishing. But the corner, as I'm sure you're all aware, gets its name from this small stream that runs under the track, and which begins its journey some 10 kilometres off to the northeast in the high fens, before snaking its way through the terrain, before eventually arriving at the circuit at the east here, where it runs under the track at this point, and so the corner name Eau Rouge is born. But what you maybe aren't familiar with is the course it takes within the circuit boundaries before exiting at the south, and Kunos have kindly luxuriated the venue with a flowing Eau Rouge for us to explore. Eau Rouge, meaning red water, is in reference to the reddish coloration of the stones on the riverbed that we can see here, which is due to the presence of iron oxide deposits, probably from historic coal mines, and this is what gives the stream its reddish tinge. So as we follow it through the park, were you also aware that health spas got their name from this little village of Spa? Well, the village has been popular since the 9th century due to the supposed healing properties of its water, and therefore the town became renowned for its magical thermal springs, and now every well-being centre is known as a spa, thanks to this town that has become steeped in motorsport history. So as we reach the most southern point of the circuit, you can see the stream again flows under the track, this time at turn 16, Stavelot, named after the nearby town, and the place where Eau Rouge flows into the Amblève River, some 5 kilometres further south. So there you go. I'm sure you knew something of Eau Rouge, but now hopefully you know the full story. On with the recap then, and we'll begin, as is customary, with the best performing team of the day, which for consecutive races is intense racing. 120 points in Hungary, backed up with another 126 here, and the Belgians are making great strides to reclaim the team's championship that they last won at Masters V. Bulk qualified 5th, finished position 4, gained a position early doors from Robert, and then seemed to be in a race-long battle with Kevin for the final podium place, but are coming together with a back marker in the dying stages put paid to that. Said his car wasn't as good as Hungary, where he took victory, but was delighted with P4 and the points haul for the team. Dorr needed a strong race after Hungary, and he delivered. Qualified 9th, converted to a P9. Mistimed his final qualifying run and struggled for the opening laps of the race before finding his feet, although never felt comfortable with the tyres, complaining they were done, and rued the decision not to take tyres at stop 2. Could offer little resistance to the advance of Rad and Florian during the final stint, but a top 10 finish for the under-the-weather David, which I'm sure was more than enough reason for the medicinal wine to flow. Grizzly Racing, and boy did they have their teeth out. I think we saw another side to rude Mr. Blue Dennis today, and it was a sight to behold. Maybe he heard my comments last time about preferring to start at the back, and went on to produce an inspired lap to start a series best P23. Could have finished the race P19 if it wasn't for his happy feet, as he calls them, but drove like I've never seen him before, pulling off a great overtake on Sven Heck, I believe. A brilliant drive from Rude, and he's got to be my Shakedown star of the day. We know of Max's fate. What a thrilling climax to qualifying, with just 2,000 separating him and Bram. Was happy to see the rain falling, but conceded Bram was simply faster than him today, but was super chuffed with his P2 result. Team WRT, and a clean sweep for our reigning Masters champion, as Bram took pole, race win and fastest lap. A margin of 25 seconds to Max at the finish line showed how dominant a performance the Belgian delivered. We learnt from the post-race interview with Miguel that he had 4 setups prepared for the race, giving some insight to the detail and preparation that these title contenders go to. Finger racing, and more good points for the Ferrari team, who seem to be working well together. Florian started 12th, finished 8th, had the potential to go quicker in qualifying, but felt P12 was okay. Started with a full tank to keep his options open, eventually pitting on lap 23 and 42 for tyres and fuel at each, which appeared to be the decisive factor in getting David at the end, who was on spent rubber. Happy with P8 and his continued improvement. Tommy seemed to be on the same strategy as Flo, showed good discipline not to trip over his teammate as the race settled. Qualified 13th, race finished 13th for Tommy. Not much more to report. Commented that the track was so dark at the end of the race, and yeah, it was. It's certainly not a Bahrain or Singapore out there in the forest. R2E went some way to repair the damage from Hungary, where the Lamborghini outfit conceded the lead of the team's championship. Sven started from P14 with a full tank, which afforded him to go long into the race, but at the cost of there being little pace in the car for the opening stint. Did allow him to make lost positions up and more with his younger tyres, bringing it home for a gain of 3 positions. Marvin, I guess the brothers were on the same strategy, as he also complained of no pace early on. The race lacked little action for his liking, but he was happy to see the rain, and hopefully he can be happy also with his rise from P17 to P10. Useless racers Rob and Paul sported a black livery in tribute to a community friend who recently lost their battle with cancer. Sad events that probably quashed the euphoria surrounding the team after their efforts in Hungary. Was another solid race from Rob though, progressing to P5 from 10th. had a lap deleted late on in qualifying when on course for a significant improvement. Paul, well, his race unfortunately killed on lap 1 and felt frustrated to be caught up in the incident on Kemmel. Major damage, but showed great resilience to grit his teeth and persevere to score more valuable points for the team. WR team, Kevin continues to fly solo for the BMW team, but it's not affecting his performance on track as the German picked up his first podium of the series. Had a code brown at the top of Radion early on when he had to take avoiding action from a spinning back marker which relinquished his position to Cliff, and then was locked in a battle with the Belgian for much of the race. That was until Cliff had his own back marker woes, which ultimately assured Kevin of P3. 77, the equal 8th best scoring team at Spa. A decent P7 in quali for Ralph, and who was looking good for a solid top 10 finish. Amidst a nice duel with David, that was until picking up a stop-go 30 late on for pit lane speeding. And with this pit lane, the last thing you want is an extra trip through it. Killed his race and had to settle for a disappointing P14. Myself, we were struggling to find pace in the AMG here, so I wasn't expecting much, and what with a 2.4 hour race, it was a fair shout that mistakes would factor. Race started well, however, from P21, and I found myself battling SDW again for much of the race. Pitted on the hour for 100 litres and new wets to suit the drying track. The expected mistakes didn't materialise, and I could make a gain of 9 positions, the best of the day, to finish P12. Paradigm Shift tied 8th with 77 on today's points. Radek continues his run of good form with a strong Q6 P6 return to equal his best result of the series, and has single-handedly hauled Poland to the top of the Nations Cup standings. Could overtake Rob early on and stayed ahead until a messy pit stop. Second stop was better, taking fresh rubber also, and used it to his advantage to overtake David and Rob in the last stint. Pawlicek very happy with P6, and yes, so you should be, Radek. The other side of the garage, well, the mechanics earned their pay today as they patched together a heavily damaged car after Jack had a heavy shunt at Puon. Q16 was qualified 16th and was looking racy until the car stepped out on the curbs at the double gauche, eventually finishing P24. Pannoni Racing Team, a good performance in qualifying saw Rob start P4 on the grid. Hoped that the rain would clear as the car was set up for dry conditions, but he didn't get his wish, and battles with Kevin, Rad and Cliff dropped Robert down to P7. Happy feet, SDW with another strong drive in the McLaren. Also thought he could have improved in qualifying, but ultimately satisfied with P22 and quickest AM Cup driver. Complained of being stuck behind the purple Mercedes, but managed to jump him in the pits, only to spin at Lecoombs on his way out and pick up some damage. The battle with 76 continued through the second stint before Sven made his second mandatory stop and also decided to repair the 27 seconds worth of damage and to fit new boots. After a feisty battle with Timo, SDW got past to bring her home in 15th, almost a minute ahead of his closest AM Cup rival. Not much to learn about Frank's race other than he qualified last and finished last, but a finish at least, and that is a little win in anyone's book. Pantera Blue, their sole representative was Nemanja Manojevic, who was focused on a clean race to escape a race ban after picking up too many penalty points along his S64 journey. And we're pleased to see he lives to fight another day. Qualified 18th, finished the race 17th, so a move in the right direction, and when you consider he also served a DT penalty, it wasn't a bad effort from the Serb. VSP Racing, Yves started 26 on the grid and made it to lap 42 before retiring. His pit count shows 3, so I guess a DT penalty was something to do with that decision. Alessandro qualified really well in the Aston actually, in P11. I haven't learnt what happened to him after that really, but also noticed his pit stop count was up at 4, so If that's because of 2 DTs, then to complete 57 laps and finish in P20 is quite a good achievement, to be honest. Alpha Shazoo and Hannah Song had no clarification of Hannah's gender after the appeal on the last shakedown, so we'll stick with what sounds right. Qualified 27th and opted to use her dry setup with wet tyres. Turned out alright, I'd say, as she brought it home for a gain of 5 places in P22. Changed the tyres just once, but looking at the pit deltas, seems she might have had some issues in one or both of her stops. And still, much to her surprise, leading the Yan Cup when we dismiss the ineligible SDW. Ineligible to win, that is, not to compete. Red Bull Roadrunners, well, the only thing more miserable than the Spa weather was the fate of the Roadrunners today. Manu, unfortunately, couldn't even make it to the server with some technical issues, which hopefully won't rear their head again. As for Simon, well, it seems the infamous puddle at the Kemmel Kink was his undoing as he drifted into Camaletto, which unfortunately led to more contacts with other drivers. The result was a bent and broken Ferrari, which he then parked. Lastly, a fruitless outing for W&W Racing. Dirk qualified 28th but couldn't manage more than 16 laps before having to retire. I'm not sure of the reason why, maybe just fed up. A DNS for Wood as he awaits an upgrade, but will hopefully back for Brands Hatch. Okay, that rounds up the shakedown of Spa. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll be back after Brands for a roundup and to see how it all stands going into the final round. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.